Hey, welcome to the Wildes. No, this is not the voice of Rabbi Wildes. Rabbi Wildes was not able to do the intro this week, but this is his producer, Andrew. And this week, we have Moshe Reuven on the podcast. Now, you might be asking yourself, who is Moshe Reuven? Well, all you got to do is just look up on Instagram. The man has over 1.5 million followers, and he's also a hip-hop artist who has millions of listens on Spotify. But his story is super interesting. He didn't grow up observant, but then he found his way to Hashem, and through his spirituality, he was able to improve his life in the physical world to such an extent that he has his own startup, that, as we just mentioned, he's a hip-hop artist with millions of followers on Spotify, and he's also an ordained rabbi. So take a listen. There's a little bit of a video issue at the end of the podcast. The audio is just okay, so you'll notice that there's a little bit of inconsistency in the video, but don't worry about that. Everything's smooth. And just don't forget to subscribe. Rabbi Wildes puts out amazing content, and it's really, really improving the lives of our brothers and sisters around the world. So please subscribe and please share. And let's get to it. Moshe Reuven and Rabbi Wildes.
Okay, welcome to the Wildes. Thank you so much for being here, Moshe Reuven.
How you doing? Hi, everyone.
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you unfamiliar, Moshe Reuven is a Jewish-American columnist. He's a hip-hop artist. He's an internet celebrity and an entrepreneur. And one of the things we're going to get into here is how you wear so many yarmulkes, so to speak, how you wear so many hats. It's unbelievable. Forbes and business, just one. I gotcha. He was named to Forbes 30 under 30. Are you under 30? How old are you?
I got it a couple months ago, so I must be. I stopped counting though.
Okay, that's great. Well, that's pretty impressive. So tell us a little. I'm curious. Let's start where it all begins. How did you come to find spirituality? I mean, did you grow up in an observant Jewish home? Is this something that you found on your own? Because clearly your spirituality has informed your material and entrepreneurial success, and that's really something I'm interested in hearing about. So tell us a little about your background.
Yeah, so it's a big question for me. I mean, because my how I found my spirituality is like everything to me. It's like my life origin story, even though I felt like I lived a life beforehand, you know. So I grew up in a conservative home, conservative Jewish in South Florida, which from what I've learned is a little bit different than some areas of the world, like conservative in New York or New Jersey could also be kind of a frum household to some extent. But we got bar mitzvah. We did like the status quo things that people do in South Florida as a conservative, shul goer, once in a while. I went to Hebrew school, so I learned, basics like Aleph Beis and, all the special stories that predominantly encapsulize the Jewish story. But, I didn't know certain things. I didn't know that, things like there's 613 mitzvahs. I just thought there's 10 commandments, which I honestly is a typical thing if you get raised. From my background, I think most people don't necessarily know these things. Just small little things I didn't necessarily fully know. But yeah, so I wasn't like super religious kid. I was,
Right.
born in the secular world and I was Jewish, believed in God and believed in being a good person and doing good things and having fun, playing basketball, stuff like that.
And how did you, at what point did that, I guess, develop into the person you've become? Because clearly you've gone way past the 10 commandments, and
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, so like I said, we were raised good kids, get good grades, go to a good school, get a good job, like that type of typical, American path. When I was in high school, even a little bit before, I got more and more engrossed in like the social life, less involved in my basketball endeavors, and that in my family that was like a real thing. If I was in school and friends, it was basketball for us. But as I drifted away towards that, I was less and less passionate about, dedicating so much time to the sport, I guess, and I wanted to be involved in the social life. The social life of the secular world in South Florida, it led me not in the best of paths, in my opinion. I got really deeply entrenched in it. I was a partier in a sense, not crazy person, but I was like, I like to have fun, and so did most people in South Florida at that age. And
is that like, you're talking high school age or college?
high school. So I always
High
say,
school.
I always think like I kind of like, because I would visit my brothers in college and I would kind of like, learn from how the college students do it. And I was like, I always felt like I was like a little bit more of a college student in high school because because I like knew the more advanced techniques of having a
Right.
fun time, I guess.
Right.
And
So you
like,
were you were precocious in your partying,
yeah.
you'd say.
Yeah, so I'd bring college to the people, But anyways, so I was just like, and there's not like crazy stuff. We would drink. We would have,
Right.
you got good grades in school on Friday night, Saturday night, maybe Sunday. You have fun. You enjoy life. Didn't really seem like a huge deviation from the general path that I grew up with. You got
Right.
good grades. You'd be a good kid, and you don't be mean to people. And it wasn't a huge deviation, but it did lead me to things like, you get involved in different groups. The more you're on that, I would be involved with different schools. Social affairs, and different parts of my high school. Not every single clique was the most spiritually uplifted clique. So it just led to me, kind of having certain things happen. I had like a near-death experience. That was one thing. I got it when after that experience, I thought I'd fixed myself up by like, okay, I only am, involved in these things, and I don't do any other things. And then I got a DUI,
Hmm.
and I just reached like multiple lows in my high
Was that
school.
was that the near death experience, or it was a different
No, they're two
experience?
different experiences.
Wow. Wow.
So like
But they all happened to you in high school. In high
yeah, within
school.
like a
This all
2 year
happened in high school.
period, yeah, and there was a bunch
Hmm.
more things, and like I didn't really technically get a DUI. I wasn't found guilty because of different like technical factors.
Right. Right.
But I still had to go through. I had to be an AA at 17 years old because I blew
Wow.
so high, and I had to. Not because I was an alcoholic, but because because I was more intoxicated than you'd usually
Right.
be to get a
Sure.
DUI,
Sure.
especially for someone 17 and not even legally allowed to be drinking. And then uh, I had to go to like some, it wasn't like technically a juvenile program. It was just like around people that got in trouble for different things, and you had to do this thing so that nothing would be on your record, basically, so that you could tell it in a
Hmm.
podcast later. So just in case, so it'd be public anyways. But anyways, so like you got, I got it expunged from my record. Basically, it wasn't there. It doesn't even. I wasn't even guilty, but I had to do all these things that like 17-year-old kids don't necessarily have to do. And along with the fact of seeing your parents, like what happened to my amazing son? Like, why is he getting in trouble with stupid things like this? And like, and it being a public event also in your small clique, in Cooper City, which that everything gets passed around, and I guess we don't, if you don't learn so much about Lashon Hara. I mean, people that learn about Lashon Hara still struggle with it. So I mean, like,
Right.
it was like, it became a very public thing, amongst my friends, amongst our family friends, and I was a bit embarrassing, I guess, for my family, and I took it really to heart, like, wow, what, because I mean, for one, the New York experience was already like a eye-opening experience for me. It was like, it was for me like I have to live a purposeful life. I have to be here for a reason. I have to
Hmm.
like, that was like the a huge thrust in the right direction, because for me I was just like, you party, and your time's wasted, and then what were you here to do? Like, you just at 16 years old, you don't think about these things because that's just what everyone's doing. But like, I mean, I just knew the trajectory of where things go in life, and people do that till they're, however, married with kids,
Sure.
even,
Sure. People
and even
spend their whole
then,
lives living like that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
even then, they're just whatever they defaulted into from that lifestyle is what they like live with, and like, then the goals is just like the typical American goals, like white picket fence, six-figure salary, different like marks that you want to reach, that America tells you, like, these are. So I was just like, wow, I can't just like, my life can't just be like waste, like, just because of my own have happy, enjoyment experiences or whatever, or like fun times or whatever with friends. Like, obviously I love my friends, I love all these things, but And also, during the time, I'd realized a lot about who my real friends are and how much people really care about me, that I spend a lot of my time with, and that I, mold my life around in a sense. And I was just like, what am I doing with the things that are important in life? Do I know even the things that are important in life? Why am I
And how
here?
did you find that, Moshe? How did you then find that? In other words, somehow you became more observant. Somehow you went from a very basic kind of background, very affiliated, conservative, you said. But how did that transition into, let's say, observing the Sabbath every Shabbat, keeping kosher, a full-fledged religious observance?
Yeah, so at first it wasn't like near the experience and like wearing a hat and jacket like next day. It was more like um I believe in, I already believed in God, but I started seeing more and more in my life how like God's like behind the scenes and like dictating how things are happening, and like God's trying to wake me up, God's showing me a different path, and like everything was pushing me, and like I was getting extreme pushes in certain directions, and I was just like, wow, like God's in the scenes. And I started opening myself up and like every day talking to God about life, about my things, about thoughts, and just realizing that I would get responses back in some way, in his own way, that it was like it created a more of a relationship than just that I believed that there's a God, like that
Mm-hmm.
story, like before I went, I believed in God. After I went, I know there's a God, like after this whole thing happened, I knew God is real and in my life. And beforehand, it was an idea. I knew that I'm not supposed to do certain things. I knew God cares generally about morality, but it wasn't like purpose, mission, and stuff like that. So over time,
Mm-hmm.
that spiritual journey led me to wanting to answer questions, having questions about different things I've never had questions about. One of my close friends at the time he was in his own way really religious, and we would speak a lot. But he was Jewish, but he didn't necessarily believe in Judaism. He was probably halfway Jew for Jay in some regard,
Mm-hmm.
but he
Mm-hmm.
was in some way deeply embedded in his idea of morals and what it means to be a good person. He doesn't believe in that stuff anymore today, but he just knows that he's Jewish. But um, it was just interesting. One of the closest friends that I could confide in, it was also someone that he had that path. He had like more of a spiritual thought process. His stepdad was a pastor who actually like tried speaking to me about different things about like spirituality and whatnot. And it was just like, I don't know, during the time it was just like I had a lot of questions about these things. I know I'm Jewish, and that's about it. I know that I have a mission in life and there's a reason behind all this Jewish stuff. I don't know anything about it really.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so when I got to college, that questioning attitude and that daily praying to God, my own way about my own whatever, that led me to looking for a Jewish place for different things, like as practical as Yom Kippur, I had to
Mm-hmm.
be concerned about, getting cleansed on Yom Kippur. Where do I go? I go to Hilla, and then I had some girl like sizing up, like, I could tell this isn't gonna happen or whatever. It was like, there's like an attitude towards me because I was still dressed like, a typical party, club going guy or whatever at like a Yom Kippur event or whatever. Nothing I thought about this is just the way I was, the way I dressed, the way I was. I mean, I don't know. So some girl said something to me. I was like, okay, probably this is the place for me. Then I started going to Hillel, you know, for Shabbos, and they weren't there a lot of the Shabbosim, and I was just like, how are you guys there for Shabbos? Like, I understand me not being there, so I was like bothered by Hillel a little at first because I was just like, it
Mm-hmm.
didn't seem like they were super serious about it, and I was trying to like at least have somewhere to go for Judaism. No offense against Hillel. There's many great Hillels all throughout America.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Where'd you
Yeah, I
go
was
to
just
where'd you
mentioning
go to college? Which campus are we talking about?
UCF, which
UCF.
actually their Hillel is much great. It was very great now. They're like they do a lot of good things. I mean, maybe it was just the
Mm-hmm.
timing, but so I just, the next other place to look for, I found a Chabad, and it was very interesting to me. I wasn't like fully going that often. I would just pop in, and I just realized whatever the rabbi was saying was like really like connected to whatever I was experiencing. Like, I don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it just felt like he had like Ruach HaKodesh or something, or like followed me around. he's been following me around or something, and he said like the right thing. I was like, how do you know? How do you know my life story, Rabbi? You don't even know my name. So like just things that he would say were like super impactful for me. I was just like, what, how? And it kept me
By
going.
the way, Moshe, I'll tell you something that I've had that a few times in my rabbinic career where someone will say, Rabbi, did you realize that the talk you just gave spoke exactly to what I'm going through in life? How did you know? And
Yeah,
I had no idea. It just happened to be what I was interested in discussing that Shabbat or that weeknight class. And then there's somebody in the room for whom it like totally resonates. You know,
yeah,
that's a little that's the big man doing his work over there.
yeah. That's the the Shekhinah speaking theory. It's crazy how that works. So that threw me off. It kept me going, but I wasn't like becoming religious or anything. I was just
Hmm.
every once in a while I would go to the Chabad house, or I would always say, "Where are you?" I'd be like, "I'm busy. I was school or this and that." And he's like, "Oh, you're always busy. You're such a busy man." And he would always try to get me to come out in some way. Eventually, I think it was on a Yom Kippur actually. I don't know if I should go through all the details about it, but for certain particular reasons, I was thinking about making certain life choices about like who I spend time with and stuff. And I was at the Chabad house, and there's this one kid on after the Yom Kippur Friday night, or what I think it was a Friday night or something. I think it was a Yom Kippur on Friday night or something like that. I don't know. But the guy's doing Tehillim, and I was like, "What's this book?" And he's like, "Oh, it's the book of King David and stuff like that." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So I started saying some, and I was just like, I really resonated with Tehillim, like all the things that King David's saying
Wow.
and his pasukim. I think that, and the other people in their respective ones. I think it was mainly the ones that were from King David that I was reading, and I was like, wow, like you know, these are prayers that are like I try to say, but like he says it exactly the way that I want to sometimes, and I was just like,
He's articulating things you're feeling. You know who else said that to me, by the way? You're in very good company. Nissim Black. I asked him what turned him on
ah,
to Judaism.
that's
He
great,
said to me, well, he said he read the whole Bible, but like the King David parts were really hit him. You
yeah,
know, he
yeah.
didn't say Tehillim per se, but like King David and like the stories with David, it was like just
Yeah,
spoke to him. You
yeah.
know.
King David spoke to me a lot too. Even when I was like, for a long time, I always was fascinated by King David. It's funny actually, like it's not as emphasized in my learning these days, but King David is
Hmm.
so huge, part of my journey, and that's cool that Nissan Lawson, we share another similarity, I guess, in being similar genre and stuff like that. But
What are you learning these days, Moshe? What's your interest now,
so I
learning
mean,
wise?
well, I mean, I just try to keep my daily learning at minimum,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
as life becomes busier and busier, the minimum is to make sure that I'm doing things like Hitas, Rambam, and make sure that I'm learning Hasidus, and on Shabbos delve into different texts that I feel I'm interested in, which is usually,
Hmm.
um, if I pick something up that's outside my regular schedule, it's going to be Hasidus most of the time. Um, Sometimes my wife and I find different things that we both are interested in. So we recently went through like all the a bunch of stories and backgrounds about the Tanaim and Amoraim to like give like
Beautiful.
more further in depth background about their lives, and you know
Guys,
the
Tanaim and Amoraim, just in case our listeners may be unfamiliar, those are the great Talmudic sages, the earlier ones who authored the Mishnah, and then the later ones who authored the Talmud. Those are the great Talmudic sages. Yeah, they're beautiful stories about their lives, and but that's amazing. Let me ask you this: you seem to be balancing a lot. You're a hip hop artist, and you're also like a bit of a celebrated entrepreneur. To be in the Forbes 30 under 30. Tell me what you've learned from your spiritual journey. Thank you for sharing that, by the way, Moshe. I appreciate it. Your spiritual journey, how you went from the kind of background you have to where you are now religiously. It's pretty transformative. How has that informed or helped you become successful as an entrepreneur? You've got this very successful startup, WeDu. Did I pronounce it right? Which helps grows businesses and markets high profile individuals, like, does branding work for people, and it's pretty up there. I did a little homework on you here. So tell me how you've been able to sort of leverage your spiritual journey and your spiritual wisdom from Torah and mitzvot to become more successful in the material world, or maybe not. I don't mean to presuppose anything. Maybe they're completely separate.
No, they're
What do you
definitely
think?
not separate. I actually attribute like all my success to the fact that, well, first of all to Hashem, but also like within my pathway with Hashem that He has me, I have to do Torah mitzvahs. I have to, I can't be involved in all the things that a person would be involved in if they weren't obligated to do those things. So, or to, to live that lifestyle. So I definitely say that everything that positives happened for me is literally because of Hashem and Torah and mitzvahs, and there's no question about it in my eyes. How I could explain that, there's multiple ways. I mean, obviously Hashem's bracha is what makes success. So if I'm doing well one year, it's because Hashem's bracha. If I'm doing less well one year, it's because Hashem's bracha is a little bit less there, or I'm not bringing it down as probably. But I would say that, overall, thank God, it's been an amazing journey of things that way beyond my mind's eye of what I could have achieved. And I think it's mainly because, there's this concept from the Baal Shem Tov that just like Eretz Yisrael is filled with all these gifts and treasures latent beneath the surface, so too is every Jew. And their Jewish neshama is filled with all these capabilities and all these gifts. And, God loads us up, so to speak, with more than we could ever imagine of what we could achieve within and different kaiches that we have within us. And the thing is that most of us live our lives unless we have Torah mitzvahs, unless we have, concepts in Hasidus to help us with, the neshama a bit covered over, if not more than a bit. And you can't really access those things because you're not in access with yourself.
Let's stay on that for a minute, because you said something very profound there the whole time, but particularly at the end. You said that we've got souls, and we all, many of us believe we've got a soul, but it's covered up. And I guess living a life of Torah and mitzvah as you're living, as we're all trying to live as best as we can, allows us to access the powers of the soul, right? How would you say that Torah does that for you? Like, how does, I don't know if it's keeping Shabbos, it's keeping kosher, or it's studying Chassidut, learning. How is that, pulling off the cover so that the soul can really, realize itself and see success in all aspects of life, not just spiritually, but even in materially, as you have in your entrepreneurial work?
So there's probably two or three ways I want to answer that. The first one would be is that, there's a voda, like a person's general voda on themselves and their connection to God every day, and how they deal with the smallest thing as what they eat, and how they eat, how they speak, how they think, what they allow around them, and how their makshava is focused on Hashem. And it's as you get more and more involved in the world, the harder that is to necessarily be a master of, because there's so much more distractions. Like, talks about in Tanya, it talks about in many places, that, the world, it's easier to be out in yeshiva and master yourself than to be out in the world and keeping mastery over yourself. But ultimately, it's a general avoda to be in tune with our neshama. It's every day, it's every moment. It's not even just in the moments. It's a pathway. It's a general activity over time that we should be working at to do the avoda of revealing our souls through being more of a soul-centric person, being, the way we involve ourselves in Gashmias, the way we daven, the way we prepare for davening, which, also gets more difficult when you have less time when you get busier and busier. So, I mean,
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
first answer. The second answer I would say is that Torah and mitzvahs is just very practically. It tells us don't be involved in this, don't do this, you know. And if you could, especially in this world where of consumerism and indulgence and involvement, and what's desirable is enhancing your double your pleasure, double your fun, or whatever they say. So like if you separate those things and make a space, then you allow yourself to be involved in other things. You allow yourself to explore beyond chasing taivas and being involved, engrossed in taivas.
Taivas, I'm just translating for our listeners. Not everybody's up on all the
Yeah,
Hebrew term. Taivas are, I guess, physical desires, and that's amazing. Before you get to the third, you'll remember the third answer, Moshe. I want to hear
think
the
so.
third answer.
I think so.
Okay, good. So the first thing you said, and I actually wrote this down. If I ever look down, it's because I'm taking notes, because I actually
That's
want to pay
amazing.
attention
Wow.
to what you have to say. So you talked about the avoda. Avoda means service, and you said the way we eat, the way we speak, the way we think, right? It's all affected by the Torah that we study, the mitzvot that we observe, and that's just going to be. You used another word which I thought was great, like a soul-centered. Was it? Would you say like a soul-centered or centric?
Soul-centric,
I don't know.
think.
Soul-centric. Yeah. No, I mean, because that's the focus, and the mitzvot. And I've studied this also. I teach a class on the Tanya, and it's the mitzvot are really there to sort of release that spiritual power that we have within our souls. And that's just going to make us more successful in everything we do. And then the second thing you said, I thought was practical. And you started off by saying, this is practical. Torah tells you, and we all need this in life. Maybe we're a little arrogant and we don't think we do, but the Torah gives us the wisdom as to what are good activities and what are activities we should stay away from, that are just going to make it difficult for us to stay soul-centric,
Yeah.
Soul-focused.
It is a good
great.
story. I didn't even think about it.
That's a great line. That was good. You could use that in
Soul-centric.
one of your songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were about to share a third.
So I think just generally, well, I think before I go into any other aspect of it, I think also like it's not just like the Torah you learn affects those things. Obviously, for sure it does, and especially it says Hasidus particularly it refines. It's in one of the Maimarim that it says it refines the lowest aspects of a person just by learning it, even if you don't do anything. The lowest parts of a person become more refined, and I see that all the time with people
By
that
learning
learn.
Torah, you mean? By learning Torah,
It
you
was
mean?
saying specifically the works of Hasidus refine the person to the depths of them in a sense. Like that Hasidus is made to do that. Because you can learn practically. Okay, don't do this, don't do that.
Right.
Good morals. From the stories, and then, but Hasidus kind of like brings it more to deeper levels of a person. From bringing from the esoteric to the most practical, in the way that Hasidus does. So yeah, I would say that if you learn about what's desirable when you involve yourself in those things, eating, speaking, doing whatever it is, thinking,
Mm-hmm.
the daily grind of what you choose in your thoughts and your speech and your action is a part of that avoda. So like when a person has a struggle, say someone really likes talking, bad about people that are doing well, which I know people like that. So, when they have that struggle, when they're around their three friends and they want to start like for bringing about Joe Schmo's, what I really think about Joe Schmo, they don't do that. That changes them. That's one simple action that allows their soul to be revealed versus covered up by their animal soul. Like the everyday
Wow.
action, everyday thoughts and speech and action that we do is the part of the avoda, and a person choosing
And
the right
you're saying
thing.
just refraining, just choosing, even if it's not doing something positive, it's refraining from sharing that glib remark about them, whatever it is that's going to reflect negatively on a fellow Jew.
Yeah,
You're saying that just pulling back from that act of refraining is a refining is refining the lowest parts of who we are.
Yeah, and it brings out the neshama to make those proper decisions. And when we make the wrong decisions, that's covering over the neshama. And with that being said, also not just refraining. Refraining is, that's a big part, but also forcing ourselves to do the right things or say the right things. I was just learning, I learned recently that in the Zohar, it says that God doesn't just look at the things that we don't choose not to say. He sees the things that we could have said, and did we say the things we should have said, so also controlling ourselves to be able to say positive things. And that could be as simple as complimenting someone, that you should have made sure that they know that they have certain strengths in something, and you should say a nice thing. Or, it goes, positive things could be said in all areas of life. So, both areas, the positive and the negative, but definitely the negative is a huge, huge aspect for sure.
Wow. Can I switch?
Yeah,
can I get into you a little? I want to get into your music a little.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan, and I was listening to your new song with Julian Marley, son of Bob Marley, which is pretty cool. It's called "Say," correct? That's the title of the song. It was awesome, and there was one part of the song that resonated when you said, "Heaven's coming down, even down to the fence. If you voted for Biden or Harris, you voted for Trump and Pence." So, were you trying to sort of get at, we live in this very divided society, and politics is a very divisive, cause of all that. But I thought I would ask about this because we're in the 9 days leading to Tisha B'Av, and we know that the Second Temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred. And we live in this very polarizing, even within the Jewish community. It's like, are you more to the right? Are you more to the left? I don't know if you know MJE. We're a pretty open, diverse community, 20s and 30s. And we've got people on. What were you trying to say in that song? And what would you say to our listeners who are, we're all living in a very divided, politics is just one of the things that's dividing a lot of people today. The whole thing on abortion just came out, and that's also a cause for divisiveness and conflict. What would you say, just on a positive note, in terms of pulling people together? And, because it sounded like that's what you were trying to say in your song called Say.
Yeah, that insight, yeah. I'd say that line, I did have multiple meanings. You can use it for a lot of things. Also, if you're using any concept of the Shekhinah or God's presence becoming more manifest in the world, or fully manifest in the world, where it's a heavenly world, or things that are not so heavenly become heavenly, it applies all across. It applies way beyond I could even imagine. It applies infinitely, so definitely there's many areas of bringing people together. I'd say that I did realize at that time, especially when I wrote the song, that there was just so much, especially in the media at that moment, so much everyone attacking each side, and people rallying so strongly behind politicians in a way that they literally hate people, and which is already done throughout all of time, but to a higher madrega, it felt like. And I just seen there's so much divisiveness on that area and all the other divisiveness areas of the world, that you can't really resolve some of these things, from a physical or political standpoint. Over time we get closer and closer to a more Mashiach world, a more heavenly world, and God willing, we'll be there soon. So even when there are those divisivenesses, there is an answer. There's a heavenly trajectory for those disputes. There is a reason for why things go out the way that they do in politics. God chooses these things ultimately, and whether you want it this way or like it this way, ultimately you'll see. And part of it says talks about it in Hasidus and Kabbalah, about how in the future, when Mashiach does come, all the darkness will be able to see what it was. And that's part of why Moshe Reuven wasn't able to go into Eretz Yisrael, is because there was all this darkness that still had to be refined and fixed, that we in the future we would be able to see what that darkness was, and that includes minor disputes, or huge disputes over politics or whatever. We'll understand why this, why that. We sit around talking as if we're gonna change the world all the time. Obviously, your vote counts, and your opinion matters, but people get so entrenched in these things to the point where it takes their lives, it takes their relationships, and it's just why do we have to allow things to pull us apart, that when in the future we'll understand different aspects of it that we won't really understand today.
Yeah, I was actually just studying this debate between Hillel and Shammai that's mentioned in the Mishnah and the oral tradition, and some of the rabbis were commenting on the debate, and they said, "Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim," that these and these are all the words of the living God, and there's a belief that there's some truth. It's difficult for us to understand how two things that are opposite or contradictory could both have elements of truth to them. And I think that's one of the most important things that I try to share with my students, that even if you vehemently disagree with somebody else, try to see the kernel of truth that other person is trying to convey. Even if you think it's misdirected, it's misguided, it doesn't belong here, but there's some truth that other human being is conveying. And we know this, the Talmud, as you know, is filled with arguments and debates. Why not just give us the bottom line rabbi whose opinion we accept? Why do we have to hear about all the divergent opinions in the Gemara and the Talmud? And it's because there is some truth there that we need to hear. And I think that's what, at least a little of what I heard in what you were just saying, but I wanted to share that also. Let me ask you another question. There are times in life when things happen and they just seem really awful from our perspective. And we have this expression, Gamzu l'tov, it's all for the good.
Yeah.
You had something happen to you when you released your first single, You're Not Alone, that seemed to really make the case for Gamzu l'tov. Tell us what happened, because I heard about it, and I kind of really wanted to hear it from you about something leaking out that wasn't supposed to go, and what happened there?
Yeah, so I wasn't using, I guess, the most expensive version of distributing your music, and they have all these like cracks in their system that are not fixed, and like it's like some guy running it. I'm not going to go into the details. That like it almost seems like some guy just running it himself. And I don't know. I put
in his basement.
Yeah. So I put in the stuff to set the date and all these things, and I was like, this song's not ready. I'm not sure. It's not finalized. The production is not there yet, and some of the things I say, I'm not sure about saying right now. But I'm at least going to do this action, like it's a practical action to set it up, that I'm going to make sure that by this date, I release this song. And somehow it released the next day. And
Whoa.
I was like, I had to choose, like, do I take it down? I mean, I didn't announce anything. I mean,
Were you like, what was your initial reaction? You were upset?
I was really
Or
upset.
you were like,
Yeah. I was really upset
Uh-huh.
because I was just like, that guy in his basement did this intentionally. He sees like some from Jew, and he's just like, haha, we're gonna set this tomorrow. So that's what was my initial reaction. And I was very upset, but I mean, I wasn't like devastated. I was just like, oh my, what do I do? Like, I was just like, and I was
Right.
bothered. I was like, I set the date this. Like, why are you doing that? Like, I was really bothered by it.
Right.
But I just was
Could you
like,
take it back? I mean, is that even technologically possible?
yeah, I could have
Could you
taken
like
it
sort of?
down.
Oh, you could have.
Yeah, I could have taken. That was the choice. I was like, do I take it down? I didn't announce anything. I don't know what any of these things mean. I'm like new to this, and I was just like, okay, we're just gonna go with it. Gamzu Tova, everything happens for a reason. I don't know if I'll ever release this song. I've been trying to release songs for years, and I never brought myself to do it. So, maybe I just need
And it
to.
took off.
Yeah,
And what happened? It took, like, big took off?
yeah, it took off way beyond my wildest imagination, and I mean, it was during the midst of COVID, and
Mm-hmm.
people were very much online, and I was pushing. I just pushed it as much as I can to get out to people, and thank God it did. And I part of growing on social was that I would be able to release it to people when I come out with music, and people would be able to latch on to it if they so choose. Because I was very concerned about that. I've seen so many people lately knew that, you know, are very talented and they just can't get their music to people, and I just didn't want to be one of those people. So it was something I was very concerned about. And so much that it froze me from releasing music. The fact that something pushed me to release music said, okay, maybe Hashem's telling me now I'm ready, maybe this is what I need, because I know that maybe in a month I'm going to want to change 7 things about the song and it's not going to come out
Right.
ever. So thank God. Yeah, it was a huge process.
I'm checking it out on Spotify now. It did really well.
Yeah,
Checking it
thank
out
God.
on YouTube. That's incredible.
We didn't really push it so
Wow.
much on YouTube. It did all right on YouTube, but I haven't really focused. My goal is to focus on Spotify, and then
How many hits did you get on Spotify? Not that I'm counting or anything like that.
it's at like it's almost a couple million,
Wow. Yeah, I see now. Wow.
which
That's
isn't
impressive.
like, in the grand scheme of things. There's songs that get billions, but it's huge for me, and that it's
It's
also
a beautiful
huge
song.
in the music world. To get in the millions is a big thing. So
Can you hear? I'm playing it
yeah,
in the
yeah,
background
yeah.
right now. I love it. It's great.
So like, I don't know if you could tell, but the production is not perfect. There's different things that
It
I would
sounds.
have definitely
It's so
fixed.
hard to. It's so hard to tell whether or not that was like purposeful intention. Like, to me, it sounds awesome. It's great.
Yeah,
It's a
that's what
great
people tell
piece.
me. They're like, no, it just sounds like the way it's meant to be, and it sounds like, you're just doing your thing. Some people tell me it sounds like there's more of an authentic touch, because you could tell you didn't sit around on it and
My,
trying to get it perfect.
I'm going to share this. My son, my oldest son, is writes music. He does a lot of musical meditations, also with Kabbalah and Hasidus, and he fresses over stuff in the studio. And
Yeah,
it's like, there's an expression, "Ein ledavar sof." There's no end to
yeah,
this.
yeah,
There's like, you can
yeah,
always tweak it, always make it. I always have these conversations because,
yeah,
by the way, I'm guilty of the same thing in my own parts of what I do. We all,
yeah,
those of us, afflicted by some perfectionism or whatever it is,
yeah, yeah.
you got to just put your best foot forward and go for it. And I just love the story. I wanted to hear that from you. I have one last question, and this is actually, you see the book in the background there where it says 40. So that's a
Yeah.
book I came out with last year called the 40-Day Challenge, which I wrote because I felt before the high holidays, we go from this very sad month that we're in, Chodesh Av, right? And then we're supposed to hit the high holidays like feeling awesome. We've got this transition month, Elul, and the month of Elul is really a preparatory kind of month. So, it's all about having a plan and preparing. And I always felt like, I run these big high holiday services. We mostly cater, I would say, to less affiliated Reform, conservative, some like modern Orthodox, but we're getting a lot of Jewish people that are just coming once or twice a year to services. And I feel like we got to give them like an awesome experience, but like people are not prepared. People are just kind of walking in and waiting for the magic of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to like take over. So I wrote this book to help get everyone, as many people who will read it, spiritually prepared. I'll send you a copy. How do you, and by the way, it's literally a 5-minute piece that you read every day. And then I've got a WhatsApp group that you can listen in on every day for 5 minutes during the 40 days between Rosh Chodesh Elul and Yom Kippur. 40 is a very important number, I'm sure you know, in terms of transformation. How do you get prepared? And I'm asking you in terms of both spiritually and physically, and how would you go about explaining also the importance of preparation? Because you could not have accomplished what you have accomplished both in hip hop and in your entrepreneurial work if you didn't prepare. So what do you think? Why is it so important? And if someone's looking for some inspiration to prepare, what would you say to them?
For preparing for me, I think things are more of a mindset and like an alignment thing. I for both hip hop, I spent more years preparing than I ever had planned. I always thought I'd make it at 17, and people would tell you that I was really talented when I was in high school, and probably my skill set was probably even better in a lot of regards because I was spending so much time on it, versus when you get older, the focus is writing songs versus being extremely talented. Um, so I spent a lot of time preparing for that mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and the skill set wise, and the audience and all these things. So I can't knock the preparation as far as like the actual details of making sure you're prepared because it does make a difference. Obviously, like we said, you could prepare forever and never do anything.
Right. As I
So
said, yeah, that balance, I think that balance is so important because, like,
yeah,
preparing, but like not being so crazed that you're just not going to do it. Or you're going to require so much, preparation that it's too exhausting. I'm just not going to end up doing it then.
yeah, and I with music, feel exhausted from the pathway that I had to go. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm only a little bit in, and the things that I'd gone through to get to here is exhausting for me. And I don't understand fully even today why Hashem chose that it would be later in life that I would start actually getting success from it.
Hmm.
But I know that everything's for a reason, so I'm sure he's right. I'm wrong. I was wrong,
So,
but
you're saying all the preparation you did in high school, where you didn't really see quote unquote success, but that was necessary to get you where you are today.
yeah, like I couldn't even find myself like feeling okay with myself spending time on like trying to create the skill set of hip hop, you know, this stage of life. It's just like something that you would do as a teen. So like that, these skills that I have are things that I'm utilizing because I believe God gave me them for a reason and I developed them for a reason. But I have things to do, I'm not spending time on like, learning these different details with this stage of life. And most people wouldn't, and I don't think it's recommended to. So if I
Hmm.
didn't do that then, that's perhaps, I never would have done that. And especially the way life goes after high school, college, everyone has your life planned out for you after that. There'd be no reason for me to pick up those skills. Every stage, there's different things. The times in yeshiva, the times in college, all these things like were development. I definitely am happy that certain things didn't come out that I would have said when I was at those stages of life because I don't
Hmm.
believe those things and I wouldn't want to
Hmm.
represent
Hmm.
those things. So I do believe that, and I've smicha now. I'm a rabbi, like to feel a little bit more comfortable about who I am in my Yiddishkeit, when I think and what I know, than when I didn't know anything. Is yeah, being a Jewish artist, I feel much more comfortable about that, than if I was making music as a Jewish artist successfully and didn't know what I was talking about at all. Um,
And,
obviously.
and what about in the entrepreneurial area? Like, how important is preparation? Like, do you spend a lot of time if you have an important meeting, like preparing for the meeting, or do you feel like you just kind of go with it? How does that work for you?
So I feel like I've been prepared over the years for that too. And like that Picasso saying, like, you made that in 5 minutes. No, it took me 40 years to be able to make that in 5 minutes. Like everything has compiled over time, and I think I understand things a lot better. And I spent a lot of time preparing in these different, fields, and learning a lot about different areas of it and learning case studies, putting myself, having trials and errors, things go wrong, things go right, that like I just feel much more confident in myself to be able to take on things as they come than I would have when I was younger. But that's all preparation that's came over years. Obviously, I still need to make sure I have dotted my I's, crossed my T's. If I'm meeting with a big client, I need to make sure that, I have the trajectory set up of what he's gonna want and how we're gonna make it
Mhm.
happen, and where we're at and where we're going and how to answer different difficult questions. I have to be prepared, but also along with that, I'm saying that life has prepared a lot of things also, thank God for me. So, I mean, it's definitely a mix of both. As far as Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there's definitely more elements. I would say if wherever a person's holding, that's where they're holding. You need to go from
Yeah.
there and make sure that you're genuinely aligned in your makshavah, your ma'isa, in your thought, speech, and action. That you're you're growing in your learning. You're getting spiritually more focused for the year ahead and all those things. But if I told every person that they need to finish Shas by Rosh Hashanah, then it'd knock them out. Like so. You every person has to grow from where they're holding and at least get aligned, for the year ahead that it's going to be a better spiritual year than also therefore, all the other aspects of life too.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly why I wrote the book, because I realized that most working stiffs, which is most of our participants who come to MJE, people, are trying to make it in New York City. They don't have a lot of spare time, but you could still spiritually prepare, even if you only have a little time, even if you can just put in that. I mean, I'm not advocating. I think it's amazing. It sounds like you spend a decent amount of time every day and you're an ordained rabbi. By the way, Mazel Tov on your smicha whenever you got that.
Thank you.
Um, I think it's really important that everybody spends some time every day on something authentically Jewishly spiritual. So that's why I wrote the book, because it's literally a 2-page chapter that you can read in 5 minutes. Go on to the WhatsApp and listen in for 3 minutes and get another insight.
That's great.
And that's why yeah, and it's working, because you got to give sort of bite size morsel, more what's bite size, bite size,
Chunks.
in order, yeah, chunks for, yeah, the Talmud says tafasta maruba lo tafasta. If you
Yeah,
grab on to too much, you end up with nothing. But let me ask you, I have one more question, Moshe, and thank you so much for your time here. This has been great.
likewise.
Did a little preparation myself, and I saw that you were interviewed, um, and you whoever was interviewing was talking about humility, and humility in light of great success, right? It's easy to be humble if you don't accomplish all that much, but someone like yourself who has millions of followers in terms of your music and has a very successful, 30 under 30 from Forbes. You quoted the Alter Rebbe, great Hasidic master, that the more successful a person becomes, the more humble they should become.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't work that way in our society, unfortunately. Okay,
Oh, bye.
that the most arrogant people in our society tend to be the more successful ones. So, you know, what do you do? And what would you suggest someone who wants to climb that ladder and end up whatever field they're pursuing, and they want to be a great success? How do they maintain their humility like you have?
Well, I mean, it says very clearly in the Torah that like talks about in Chumash, when I give you all this wealth and all these blessings, don't like now you're gonna don't start thinking that it came from your hand. Like all the Torah talks about, like ultimately everything's from Hashem. If Hashem chooses you to have be to do something successfully or not successfully, that's completely His choice. You have to make your vessel, and God's choice is how the blessing pans out for you. So we don't really control the results as much as we think. There's people that do everything right in business and fail and suck at their jobs or whatever. Sorry to say suck. That's not a nice word, but you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah,
and it's not because
yeah,
them. It's not because they're not good. They are great. They do everything right, but it just, the blessing necessarily wasn't there. And then there's people that don't do anything right and they just wing it. And then like, I don't suggest doing that, but you're supposed to make your Kli, but there's people that sell rocks and become millionaires. So you have
It's so, by the way, I can't even tell you, I'm a fundraiser, and it's whether, sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it, but it's unbelievable how much of what you just shared
I
I
already know what
see.
you're
It's
thinking.
crazy.
I know
It is
exactly what you're
crazy.
thinking.
The amount of money I've seen people who are just not terribly,
Smart.
who don't seem so, they don't seem so impressive. And like, then you meet somebody else who's like unbelievable. They have it all, and they haven't gotten the bracha yet. I mean, it's really interesting.
There's a lot of dynamics. I think about it all the time. Some of the most successful people I know are not smart people at all. Like I know that's part of their success. Like, I feel like Shem shows them to like show that, show that like it really
Yeah,
is me. And
right.
then
If God, that's a great line. It really is me. If this guy can be so sick, there's some higher force working behind the scenes.
That sounds so awful. No, everyone's smart in their own way too. Like some people can't
Right.
articulate themselves at all, and they're brilliant at some specific thing that makes them wealthy. But so it's not always so pressure. But I think for myself, I've seen the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. Like I've seen success. I've seen where things have went perfect and beyond my wildest dreams. I've seen where I knew I was so much better than what the results brought. And ultimately both times, I realized that it's ultimately in Hashem's hand, and also I have to make sure I do my shtadlut properly every time, and I have to be a kli for the bracha, and ultimately just knowing that it's from Hashem, like knowing that's really the main thing is like, and then also the fact that when you get more successful, you start seeing how anyone could have done that in some regard. You start seeing how if someone else, like that concept of like, if someone else had my talents, if someone else had my opportunities or situations, they would have done more than me, for example. And seeing also how hard people work and how much effort everyone, like there's people and, that, like I'm saying, like we were saying, like the amount that people do is humbling. Like the amount that how hard people work, they dedicate their lives to things, whether it goes their way or not, as far as finances go. Yeah, that's humbling in itself, because sometimes you make large sums of money, not really feeling like maybe you feel like in that area you didn't do that hishtadlut that person did for 10, 20 years, 40 years. And then there's some things that you feel like you put so much work in and it didn't make you anything. So it's just so obvious that God's hand is in it, and that what the results are not really up to me, and I'm just trying my best to make sure that I continue to be a kli for his blessing. And that's it.
A kli. Those of you listening, a kli is a vessel that we want to try to make ourselves into a vessel that can contain God's incredible.
Yeah, and I've also
blessing.
seen how God could take things away, right. And He could take everything away one day. He could bless you with everything one day. It's literally in His hands. There's people that have gained massive success and lost it all. There's people that have been, like KFC, whatever his name is, Colonel Sanders, and then when they're 60, God decide, okay, you're the richest man in the world. Like it's just it's so non-predictable. And also when you talk about things, when you say like this guy went to the right schools and all these things, sometimes I also feel like the school system, all those things they teach you, and people will often say, not my words, they train you to be employees. There's nothing wrong with that. Employees can make a lot of money. You could make a fortune as an employee. But in general, there's certain caps on a lot of those job opportunities, a lot of those different things that people that are entrepreneurial, willing to put, not have the same job security, they have to fend for themselves every single day. You have much more potential to make more money. You have much more potential to make less money. So right. It's like putting yourself in the right ball game also to be able to have massive successes we're not taught that from birth to do that. We're taught to live a secure life where you just have a paycheck every month and you don't need to worry about it, just keep your job. So, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, you need to have certain confidence for that. You
Yeah,
really
I mean,
do.
they say C students are
You
the
know,
ones that do that because they don't have confidence that the system's going to make them successful. A C student is going to say, well, I'm not going to be able to compete and make as much money as the next guy if I'm within the system's rules of like just, get a job and just follow this standard trajectory. Maybe not. But that's more of a person that's saying, okay, I'm willing to try something else or whatever. I think there's also some elements of, if your person doesn't have that scenario, it's also elements of trusting Hashem that this is like what they believe that they're supposed to do. This is their pathway. You don't necessarily have to be a bad student to go be an entrepreneur. It's just a common thing that happens. So I mean, there's that aspect of trust. Like I believe that Hashem's gonna bless me. I just need to do the right things, and and also being willing to take the risks. When you're younger, it's easier to take risks. So I was always encouraged at a young age. I was encouraged when I was in my early 20s to be a risk taker, not to stay inside the lines. From some of the people that I know that went to the best schools in the world, telling me that. And I had a mentor that sold his company to Pfizer for like $2 billion. And he went to Chicago Booth, MBA, and PhD from like another, like top school and whatever. He was a PhD, and he was guiding me to build companies, show me how to position myself so that I would be a success. Like, and my dad also, and all these people that I learned from, they don't come from backgrounds where they weren't good students. They were, it was just that they're showing you this is how you could become a huge success at a younger age.
Right.
It's just not usually the pathway that's suggested because it's not, I was in accounting school. My dad's focus was, work at a firm, accounting firm until you're later on it. I was like, I'm studying accounting because I want to learn business. I don't want to be an accountant. Like I don't want to. I wanted it. So I don't know. I ultimately, I said, it's all down to the bracha of Abishur, and we just have to do our best. That's the main thing.
Well, I really, really appreciate these words of wisdom, both in the spiritual and the physical realm. Moshe, Hashem should bless you. You should continue to be a vessel for God's incredible blessing in everything you do. And just keep shining a great light for the Jewish people, because your incredible music, besides the unity, it really helps, I think, and this conversation I think was really helpful in learning and how we can all access the power, how we can learn to access the power of our souls, to really remove the klipa and remove the covering and be able to really tap into something that's deeply powerful that each of us possess. And just so many of us don't even know we have it, let alone how to access it. And I appreciate you getting so personal and giving us some tips on how that can be used for success, both in the spiritual and physical realm. So thank you so much for your time. We really, really
thank you for having me. Everyone should be blessed, and you as well. And God bless you for all that you do. It's amazing. And we shall all have abundance. Only simchas.
Amen. 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 Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.